Stan Cullis was gone and Wolverhampton Wanderers' demise was supposed to follow, except it didn't. Except the Europe-faring team Cullis had long promised arrived in a new decade called the 70s. This is the Wolves team that everybody outside of Molineux has criminally forgotten about. September the 15th, 1964 will forever be a black day in the Black Countries Association with football. It was the day Stan Cullis was unceremoniously fired less than 24 hours after a 4-3 win over West Ham. Cullis had just returned from sick leave, delivered the club's first win of the season, not to mention put the entire club on the map and helped lay the foundations for European football as we now know it, and now he was on the scrap heap. By the end of the season, they had been promptly relegated under the management of Andy Bitten. After losing 9-3 at Southampton in September 1965, it was no wonder that Bitten was sacked 48 hours later. Ultimately, his successor Ronnie Allen would take Wolves back up via a late piece of brilliance to sign Derek Dougan and a 4-1 win over Bury on April the 22nd, 1967 confirmed that. And whilst they would lose a championship decider at Highfield Road in the following game, they followed Coventry up to the top tier. It was exciting times as Wolves not only posted themselves back to the big time, they underwent a gruelling pre-season in America and Canada, which ended with a bizarre 6-5 win over Aberdeen. Soon though the real stuff got going, first with a win at Craven Cottage and then straight into the fire of a Black Country derby that ended 3-3 at Molineux. After a third successful game beating title contenders Leeds, the wheels promptly fell off the entire season before September had even had chance to show up. If they weren't teaming a 4-match losing streak in the league with a first hurdle exit from the League Cup, they were having a miserable start to 68, gaining just 2 points from 9 matches. They wouldn't furnish 1968 with victory until March the 9th, 2-1 over Sunderland if you were wondering, and by that point they were firmly embedded into a relegation scrap. Thankfully for the Molineux faithful, the team in front of them just about managed enough points, 14 from their last 13 games, in order to climb into safety. But when Liverpool rocked up in the West Midlands that September and stuck 6 past Wolves, Ronnie Allen's days were numbered. He was able to stave off the sack for a couple of months, yet masterminding wins over Coventry, Sheffield Wednesday and West Ham, before being sacked after a draw at Turf Moor in mid-November. Allen's successor would be receiving Wolves in 14th place, i.e. no man's land. Wolves hired Ipswich Town boss Bill McGarry, cut from the same cloth as Major Frank Buckley. Perhaps it was a stricter disciplinarian type which the club craved. McGarry announced himself with a quote, "Deep inside me I want to win, every game in every league." Wolves obliged, snapping straight into gear, Derek Dougan and Peter Knowles bagging braces in a 5-0 whitewash of Newcastle before Dougan struck again in the next home game, another win, this time against Spurs. Naturally, McGarry couldn't maintain that, idling by in 15th place when 1969 showed up, having lost as many as he had won in the league. Amid Spurs gaining ample revenge in the FA Cup 4th round in January, Wolves underwent a delve into the abyss. They began the year with a decent enough win over Forest, but promptly managed to win only 1 from their next 12, taking the club to Easter and to the fringes of the relegation conversation. Thankfully, McGarry's side had drawn far too many games to get roped in and won only 1 from their remaining 5, typically against reigning and soon-to-be dethroned champions Manchester City. Either way, an inauspicious start to life in the Molineux dugout for Bill McGarry.
And Cullen going in, a goal! You can!
It would get better as 4-1 to begin the league campaign attested to. Just forget about the 8 draws and 2 defeats across 10 games that preceded the footage we've just shown you. It was an average start to the season that was spiced up by the news that 23-year-old Peter Knowles shockingly announced his retirement from football to focus on his new faith as a Jehovah's Witness. Either way, the formatting of 2 points for a win was doing all the heavy lifting as Wolves entered spooky season in 5th place, only 8 points behind eventual champions Everton. Their form only improved, Wolves taking the scalps of West Brom and Arsenal before, most impressively, tearing one of the finer Chelsea teams apart by 3 at Molineux 2 weeks out from Christmas. Ending 1969 with a valuable point at Old Trafford, McGarry could finally say he had got comfortable in the role as Wolves manager. In January, Wolves began the 70s with no signs of slowing, taking revenge out on Burnley for the FA Cup exit, as well as dispatching Bobby Robson's Ipswich at Molineux. Sat in 5th place, Wolves were dreaming of a European return. Instead, they wouldn't win another game all season. 5 draws, 8 defeats, 0 victories, and a final resting place of 13th, and ultimately only an incremental improvement of 3 places and 5 points when so much more had been promised. The form typically bled into a horrendous start to the new season. Soon enough, the toil of McGarry's work would come to fruition. Finally, after overcoming a cartilage operation, Kenny Hibbert made his long overdue first sustained run in the team, which started with a goal against Chelsea in a September draw. And when you add Arsenal's Bobby Gould to the tune of 50 grand, you had the beginnings of a somewhat functional team.
Gould in here. There it is. Gould. Dugan up with him. There's Dugan. Derek Dugan.
The 70s had belatedly got going with the fine run of autumnal form, which defeated both Manchester clubs and gained the Black Country bagging rights over the Baggies. By the turn of the year, with a win over the champions, Wolves found themselves 6th. Some might say similar surroundings to where they had been 12 months prior. The question now was, would they stay the course? An unbeaten 6 weeks to kick off 71 said so, as did a Molineux triumph over Liverpool, and 4 stuck beyond their opponents at the Hawthorns. Gould was banging in the goals, the midfield was now a well-oiled machine, and Wolves were virtually irresistible.
Higa. Good running by Higa. Oh, a chance for Dugan.
Entering April, they stood 3rd, albeit a long way off the pace set by Leeds United and Arsenal. In the end, 3 wins from their final 7 would be enough to confirm 4th, a long way encased in the European places, thanks to 5th place Liverpool reaching the FA Cup final and Chelsea winning the Cup Winners' Cup. It was Wolves' highest league return since 1961, and they even marked the campaign with a trophy. Who cares if it was Hearts and the Texaco Cup? It was a springboard. It had been a bruising start to the 1971-72 campaign, out at the first available opportunity in the League Cup before scraping only 3 wins from their first 9 matches in the league. Then followed the shocking sale of Bobby Gould to the Hawthorns of all places. But we all know that's not what you're here for. You're here for Wolves' first European game in 10 years. It had been a long time since Wolves had missed out on a Cup Winners' Cup final in 1961. Now they would welcome Portugal's Académica Coimbra to Molineux. As Wolves were distributed out onto the continent, to Portugal, to the Netherlands and to East Germany, they finally found their First Division legs in mid-November as the cool weather blew in. They had scratched and clawed to win both points against Brian Clough's upwardly mobile Derby County on November the 13th. It was the much-needed win as McGarry found his first-choice 11. In fact, it would be the same 11 that would play in each and every game of a wonderful end to 71 and an even better start to 72. Wolves were only 5 places and 4 points off the pace when they were unceremoniously slapped for 5 by Man City. They had been ejected from the FA Cup 3rd round by the perennial cup bridesmaids that were Leicester City, and whilst they did show some inconsistencies, ultimately dropping out of a 4-pronged title race. But that was only understandable. After sinking Karl Zeiss Jena of East Germany in the 3rd round of the UEFA Cup back in December, the royalty of European football continued to roll into the West Midlands to provide springtime distraction. Juventus were arguably the biggest team in Italy despite their Milanese brethren, the ones hoarding the European Cups. Meanwhile, Ferencvaros were no mugs. You only needed to ask none other than Juventus, as they had lost to the Hungarians in the 1965 Fairs Cup final. And then the news from Italy: we would have an all-English final. Tottenham Hotspur meant it was 6th versus 9th in the First Division, the team that won England's first European trophy versus the team that helped bring the idea of European competition to the continent.
Free kick to Wolves just outside the box. Quickly taken. Hagen. Mikhailov. Roddy. Still seeing spreading out. Square. What a shot! Hit that one. Argentina's maybe one. And Muller is getting it! Here is running away. Oh, and a great goal!
Despite Spurs manager Bill Nicholson's admittance that his team never really controlled the match, Wolves would trundle away from the season empty-handed. However, they would have their say on the destination of the Championship, ripping it away from Don Revie, his allegedly bribe-ridden hands, and his Leeds United team. McGarry got his wish. He didn't have to fulfil his wish of sacking a player for throwing the match, and Wolves were just about ready to go again.
Let's do it to the middle. Oh, he did that. And he's still not outside.
John Richards had found the net with regularity the prior season, but he had just about become prolific in the 72-73 season. Once they'd shaken the hangover of the UEFA Cup final defeat, Wolves bounced back from their opening 2 defeats to just 1 loss from the next 11 in league competition. The last run on that sequence was perhaps Richards' finest performance, rattling in 3 against Stoke on a balmy Molineux afternoon. By the opening of Advent calendars, if Advent calendars were even a thing in 1972, Wolves' season had descended into the mid-table mundanity they had been accustomed to before Bill McGarry pitched up in the West Midlands. There was always a saving grace though, and in the first half of this season that came courtesy of the League Cup, via Orient and Wednesday before the more conventionally suffixed Bristol Rovers and Blackpool in the quarter-finals. An old enemy awaited in the semis.
Pratt. That's a good shot and a beautiful goal.
Same opposition, same old mistakes, as Spurs used their cup prowess to nudge beyond Wolves before claiming the trophy. Wolves were now getting on for 13 years without silverware, unimaginable during the Stan Cullis days at Molineux. That era was becoming quite the outlier. But then again, the FA Cup was still on offer, and well...
Dugan. Bailey to try it. Good try. Look at the FA Cup. And heading into a very fair ball. All officially on goal Glacier. And he's there. He slipped. And foul. Jones trying to feed on him.
Despite sneaking through the challenges of Manchester United and Wolves' bogey team Coventry City, plus Millwall and Bristol City, all without conceding, Leeds United proved too strong at Main Road. Still, Wolves won bronze in the FA Cup, yet this was in the bizarre world of the FA Cup third place playoff, which was quickly ditched and forgotten about in 1974 after 4 pretty pointless years of the match existing.
Still Natras. Oh, yes. The call stops him, and the penalty. Francis takes it. It's 4-2 Rangers.
Right from the off, it had become apparent that the league was going to be a non-starter in the 1973-74 campaign. The facade of wins over Norwich and Sheffield United couldn't wait to be peeled back in favour of 5 lost on the spin and just 2 Molineux victories before Christmas. Once again, Wolves had to hitch their wagons to a cup run, or 2. It wouldn't be in the FA Cup as Leeds had their number once again, this time in a mucky January 3rd round as opposed to the glamour of a semi-final in early spring. Let's rewind to October, where Wolves' League Cup campaign began in the fog of the Shea and Halifax Town. Derek Dougan starred in a 3-goal triumph in West Yorkshire before a mix of a resilient Tranmere, some floodlight failure and a late Barry Powell winner saw to Wolves' progression through a 3rd round replay. The 4th round would be ever so slightly easier as they whipped 4th Division Exeter City 5-1 on a Tuesday afternoon. This bequeathed Wolves a quarter-final match with the almighty Liverpool.
It's away. Being chased by Lloyd. He shot it in a beautiful goal.
The bizarre backdrop of December sunlight a week out from Christmas the setting for Wolves' progression into the League Cup semi-final, where they would meet the previous year's finalists Norwich City. Losers then, losers now, John Richards scoring home and away for Wolves as Norwich were beaten 2-1 on aggregate. It meant Wembley for the first time since their 1960 FA Cup triumph. Back then it was Blackburn Rovers, now it was Manchester City. Tragedy struck 2 days out from the final when Wolves number 1 Phil Parkes was ruled out for the grand occasion with ankle ligament damage. It left the goalkeeping onus on Gary Pearce, who would be either celebrating or enduring his 23rd birthday at Wembley.
Back for power again. Now is this the moment? Hit it with a shot! Oh, this is the chance for Bale! And it's big for Sunderland. And now it's the chance for Richards! Oh,
In the end, any fears about Pearce's inclusion were quickly swatted aside as a stand-in keeper produced a player of the match performance. Wolves had ended 14 years of hurt and that was supposed to be that, a new era. A cursory glance at the league table told otherwise. The club was sat in 17th, a mere 5 points from relegation. Thankfully they would lose just 2 of their remaining 11 to hit the shivering heights of 12th come the summer. The 1974-75 season was here. Wolves were back in Europe, they had a trophy to defend. It truly was a dividing line in the club's history.
Bonds, and now with Trevor Brooking. He tried to nudge it through, Molineux! Yes! Number 5! That's Lloyd, that's a goal. It's 2-1.
Get yourself a club that can do the lot, they say. First up, we've got Wolves pulling out a serious performance in Europe, defeating Porto 3-1. Wedged between domestic cup defeats in the League Cup at home to Fulham and in the FA Cup at home to Ipswich. The victory over the Portuguese club will be Wolves' only cup win all season. After all, they had been unable to revert the 4-1 deficit they had created for themselves on the Iberian Peninsula from the first leg. In the league, a virus swept through the club in the opening weeks of the campaign, but Wolves were stable enough to survive that ordeal. In fact, it would be their most lucrative time of the campaign, beating both Burnley and Wolves with a handy draw at home to FA Cup holders Liverpool in between. Aside from that, it was more of the same. They'd fall to their bogey team Coventry City whilst oscillating wildly between impressive triumphs against good teams in Everton and Ipswich before allowing West Ham 5 and Luton 3 to toss up the goals. Whilst they could rely on Kenny Hibbitt to run in those goals 4 against Newcastle in August, and they could pull such results out of the bag like a 7-1 against Chelsea in March, Wolves experienced a carbon copy league performance. 12th again this time with 3 more defeats, 2 fewer points, and somehow, given what I've described, less goals in games featuring the old gold. Cash have been thrown at the problem. Willie Carr debuting in the aforementioned 7-1 pulverisation of Chelsea, he cost a whopping 100 grand from Coventry. The following season was mere proof that this did not work.
Oh, good ball, Hector. 1-0. Driven well. Might come in from Neymar. Oh, yes! Near post. Tripped by the referee, halfway to score.
It was an utterly abhorrent start to the 75-76 campaign that saw just 1 win from their first 11 games and only 2 wins from their first 15. The story it told was a team in decline, beginning in November in the relegation zone, soon to bomb out of the League Cup to lowly little Mansfield Town, and with very little hope outside of that. Christmas only confirmed the miserable denouement to what had been a horrible year. 5 defeats as Wolves entered 1976 only off the bottom because of a historically bad Sheffield United. Irritating too when they were still quite clearly capable of producing results like this.
And that's a goal for Richards. Road number 8. Found room. Shot could be on. Martin, he can find it. There's Daly. This time Richards in the middle unmarked. It could be 5. Yes.
The new year inherently would bring new promise though, and they came via the medium of the FA Cup. To show Wolves could pull it out of their arse on their day, they went and eliminated both Arsenal and Ipswich from rounds 3 and 4 before dispatching of Charlton to reach the quarter-finals. Wolves were now 2 games away from Wembley again. They met the newly promoted Manchester United, and not only that, they had brought them back to Molineux for a replay.
Kindon challenging, got them! Wide goal, Steve Kindon for John Richards. Made good space, 2-0. It's down for Greenough, McElroy, and there it is! Yes! from parking, got his cross in, and it's there now. And Jerry Daly, and nobody challenged him. Pearson. That'll do.
But it wasn't to be. Wolves though had up their form. It was simply an imperative by this point. After winning just 4 league games in the back end of 1975, Wolves rebounded to win 3 from the first 6 weeks of 76. Still amongst the dead men in 21st place, now all distractions were removed. Wolves were handed an automatic 2 points with the visit of Bramall Lane shortly after their cup elimination. It should have bolstered their mood heading into the spring and a make or break 9 matches, as 1 point split them from safety and relegation.
Richards trying to curl him down. Hibbets, and it was deflected. Get for Richards. Oh, lovely turn. Carr. Now Kelly. Carr. Richards.
5-0 against Newcastle. You might think Wolves were still on the up. Nope, this was their first victory since Bramall Lane and the situation was still desperate. They had Birmingham City and Burnley to thank for being just as abject as they were. Still, 4 games remained for Wolves to salvage something of their season. A quick glance at the fixture list sent shivers down the spines. The trips to Highbury and Highfield Road with home fixtures against Norwich and Liverpool. It went very much to the historical data. Wolves floundered in North London and in Coventry, leaving a grim league picture, since Birmingham had simply decided to pull results out of nowhere, sticking 3 goals past both Ipswich and Spurs. 1 more point would consign both Wolves and Burnley to the drop. Then that little old Easter holiday narrative device spat out a pair of results that took things nervelessly into the final day 2 weeks later. John Richards nabbed Wolves' winner against Norwich. Meanwhile, news from Stoke was good news. The home side had gotten both points from Birmingham. With the better goal average, Wolves needed a win and prayed for a Birmingham defeat on May the 4th. But then you looked at the fixture list again, and it couldn't have fallen any worse for McGarry's men. Wolves hosted a Liverpool side who still needed something to win the league ahead of QPR. Birmingham travelled to one of the worst sides to ever grace the First Division in Sheffield United.
Night to remember for any of the Liverpool fans in attendance, but with quarter of an hour to go, they trailed to Steve Kinden's opener.
Looking for this vital goal. Chipped up in the box, on by Toshek to Keegan, and the old firm have done it. Heel knocking it in, comes sideways, Toshek taking his time, but using it to perfection. Fine style. Here's Ray Kennedy, slipped his man quite superbly, and what a lovely left foot.
Wolves would have to start again in the second division. It was either going to be a resilient rebound into the top flight or one of the sport's biggest demises. Find out tomorrow. Until then, catch up with happier times, the Stan Cullis years at Molineux.